Homeschooling is growing faster than ever, and it's not just about choosing where kids learn, it's reshaping what education can look like and how learning fits into everyday life. My son is 4, and lately I've been doing a ton of research, reading, and asking questions about what education can actually look like, whether it's public school, private school, or even something a little bit different like homeschooling. As I've looked into the research, the stories, and the results that families are seeing, I've realized this isn't just an alternative, it's a model that's actually working and growing. In this video, I'll share key facts, stats, and insights that have helped shape my perspective. This will be for those who, like me, are interested in exploring different possibilities for education for their children. Now let's get into it. Homeschooling used to be seen as a fringe option, maybe for super religious families or for people living in the woods, but today it's mainstream and it's growing faster than ever. According to the National Home Education Research Institute, there were 2.5 million homeschoolers in the US in 2019. By the end of 2021, that number actually jumped to 3.7 million. That's nearly a 50% increase. The US Census Bureau also confirmed this trend, reporting that the percentage of homeschooling households more than doubled during the pandemic. And this is from 5.4% to 11.1%. And in some states, this was actually even higher. And what's most interesting is that the numbers actually did not drop when schools reopened. A lot of families stayed with homeschooling, not out of necessity, but because they discovered it actually worked. And in my life too, I've actually noticed a shift. I grew up hardly knowing anyone that was homeschooled. Now more and more young families that I personally know are choosing this route. So why are families making the switch? Well, here are some of the biggest reasons. Concern about public school curriculum or policies, a desire for more academic flexibility and challenge, concerns about school safety and mental health, religious or value-based education, more time for travel, creativity, and hands-on learning, and also stronger family connection and better social environment. So it's not just one issue. It's a growing awareness that there's more than one way to do education. And as more people step into homeschooling and share their experience, that movement is gaining real momentum. So let's talk about academics, because one of the biggest fears people have is, will my child fall behind if I homeschool them? But the research is actually saying something totally different. According to the NHERI, homeschool students score 15 and 30 percentile points higher than public school students on standardized tests, and that's across reading, science, and language arts. But what really stood out to me is this: those scores actually held up regardless of the parent's educational level or household income. So you don't need a master's degree or a teaching license to help your own child succeed. The key difference seems to be that homeschoolers benefit from focused, intentional learning that's also a flexible environment as well. A nationwide study by Dr. Brian Ray looked at over 11,000 homeschool students and found that on average, homeschoolers scored in the 87th percentile, while the national public school average sat around the 50th. And that makes sense when you think about it. Homeschooling often means one-on-one or small group instruction. If a child doesn't understand something, they can pause, get help, and if they're ahead, they can move on and dive deeper. It's not rushed, it's not standardized, it's organic, it's natural, and it's human. Reading stories from homeschool parents, I kept seeing the same thing over and over again. It's not about perfection, it's mainly about presence, and that simple shift seems to be making a dramatic academic difference. This was one of the things that surprised me as well. Most homeschoolers are only spending 2 to 3 hours on formal academic training per day, and they're still outperforming their peers. At first, that seems almost too good to be true, but when you look closer, it actually starts to make sense. In a traditional school, 6 to 8 hours a day doesn't mean that they're actually learning intentionally during that time. There's a bunch of things that happen, whether it's arrival, announcements, lunch, distractions, all these things that come into play when there's a big classroom of kids, but all those things don't impact their learning. Homeschooling strips a lot of that out the way. It's lean, it's direct. If your kid gets math done in 30 minutes, you don't need to stretch it to fill a period. You move on and learn even more. And a 2020 report from the National Household Education Survey found that most homeschool families spend about 2 to 4 hours per day on core academics. The rest of the day often includes reading, outdoor time, chores, hobby, or even rest. All of these are valuable to helping the learning experience. And this completely reframed how I think about productive learning time. What if less structure actually creates more curiosity? And what if having space to rest and explore leads to deeper retention? Homeschooling seems to ask those questions, and from what I can tell, the answers are encouraging. And another common concern is, will homeschoolers be ready for college or the real world? And the research here is pretty compelling. A study from the University of St. Thomas found that homeschool students both had higher GPAs in both their freshman and senior years of college and graduated at rates 33% higher than those from public or private school. Why? Well, one reason might be initiative. Homeschooling often requires kids to manage their own time, work independently, and take ownership of their own progress. I think back to my own education and realize I was often trained to just complete assignments, and that didn't really lead to me learning on my own per se. Homeschoolers, from what I've read, are more likely to be self-directed, and that shows up in their performance later in life. So if college or the real world is a concern, the data actually suggests that homeschoolers are doing more than fine, and in many cases, they're thriving. Okay, so now for the classic question, what about socialization? This is probably the most common worry people bring up when they hear about homeschooling, but the more I read, the more I realize this is actually an outdated picture of what homeschooling looks like. In reality, homeschoolers actually have more diverse and meaningful real-world social interactions than their public school peers. They're spending time with people of different ages, siblings, adults, older, younger peers. They're part of co-ops, sports teams, church groups, nature groups, music lessons, and so on. The National Home Education Research Institute reports that homeschoolers consistently score above average in social, emotional, and psychological development. And that makes sense. In public school, your social world is limited to your grade. You're around the same group of kids every day, whether they're good influences or bad, but in homeschooling, parents can be more intentional about who their kids are around and what kind of social environments they're engaging in. And that's guided connections. And for many families, it's actually producing better social outcomes. So this is one of the things that really made me pause and think. What would it mean to build a family rhythm where education and life happen together and not separately? In a typical school schedule, kids are out the door early, home late, and often exhausted. Evenings can feel rushed with dinner, homework, bath, and bed, and we all know the weekends are short, and before you know it, the years are flying by. Homeschooling actually flips that. It creates a slower rhythm and it gives families more time to spend together. It turns learning into a shared experience, something that you do as a team. Studies have shown that homeschooled kids tend to have closer relationships with their parents and siblings and report higher levels of emotional security and trust. That's something that I've thought about a lot. What if education could actually draw our family closer instead of pulling us in different directions? For many families, that's been one of the most unexpected and beautiful benefits. That is what I actually think is the most compelling part of homeschooling to me. And also, every child learns differently, but school, by design, can only personalize for them so much. There's curriculum, a timeline, and a group to manage. It's efficient, but not very flexible. Homeschooling allows parents to adjust how and what their child learns based on their strengths, interests, and struggles. Visual learners can see, auditory learners can listen, hands-on kids can move, and quiet thinkers can take their time. According to NHERI, individualized instruction is a huge part of why homeschoolers do so well academically. Kids learn better when they're taught in a way that works for them. And I've been thinking a lot about this. What if instead of fitting kids into a system, we could build a system around the kid? That's what homeschooling seems to allow. And that's why it's starting to feel more than just a backup option. It might be a better one altogether. We're starting to dip our toes into homeschooling right now, and the more I learn, the more I understand why so many families are choosing this path. And if you've been thinking about it too, I hope this gave you some clarity or at least some encouragement to keep digging. If anything in this video stood out to you, drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if you're already homeschooling or just now looking into it. And if you've been homeschooling for a while, please feel free to share a tip or experience in the comments. I know a lot of us would benefit from hearing what's worked for you. Lastly, if you're into conversations about parenting, family rhythms, or education, hit subscribe. I'm just getting started with this channel, and I'd love to have you along from the journey. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.